to this episode of the Voicefluencer Show featuring the operator, Collin Borns. Super excited to have Collin join us today. He's going to be one of the Voicefluencers on the upcoming episode of The Voice Den happening on Wednesday, August 25th. But today we are really lucky to have Collin join us for a few minutes here and learn a little bit about what he's up to over at Speechly. So without any further ado, let's bring up Collin. And as usual, we've got our co-host here, Ian Utility. Hey, Collin, how's it going?
Great. Yeah, thanks for having me. How are you doing, Teri, Ian?
Wonderful. So good to see you. Ian, how's it going?
It is a happy Tuesday, my friends.
Awesome. Well, we have had a chance to chat with Collin and the Speechly team over the last little while. Thanks again to Speechly for being a sponsor of VoiceCon Live. Really appreciate that. Collin, we're thrilled to be able to chat with you today. So let's just dive right into it. I'd love for you to maybe share a little bit about you, your background with the viewers, the listeners, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, so started getting involved with the voice community when I started working in the financial operations department at VaynerMedia. Obviously, Gary Vaynerchuk's a big proponent in the world of voice technology. So a lot of us in the world of voice are probably familiar or maybe even got a little bit inspired to get involved with this space from Gary. So from there, was able to build a really interesting network and get involved in the community and had the opportunity to start investing into different startups in the space at a small venture firm called Voice Punch, and luckily met the team at Speechly and now head up business development for the team. Maybe just in a nutshell, what we do. Speechly is a fast, accurate, and simple voice interface API for web, mobile, and e-commerce. So we allow developers to easily integrate voice interfaces that are able to understand the user the second that they start speaking versus after they finish speaking, like you might be familiar with everyday voice assistants. And rather than enable a new conversational channel, our technology is more focused on voice as a feature of existing experiences. So you can think of blending voice as an interface or voice as an input layer alongside these existing modalities like touch and type for overall just more efficient experiences.
Awesome. And I know that's been sort of one of the themes that you've been speaking about, voice as a feature. Can you expand on that a little bit more and what that kind of means to you? And then we'll get over to you, Ian, for a question.
Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, the way that I think about and the way that we think about voice at Speechly is at the end of the day, voice is a really good interface to technology. And so when you think about the voice interface as a feature of existing experiences where we're spending a lot of our time, mobile, web, this really leads to a different way to approach voice technology and voice-enabled experiences altogether. So some of the benefits that we see from looking at voice more as an interface feature versus voice as a channel, like we've become familiar with, again, in like the Alexas or Google Assistants of the world. The benefits of approaching voice more as a feature is you can really focus on actually completing a user task. So you can think about it again, when you're looking alongside touch or type, it doesn't just have to be an individual channel. You can really think about, okay, where does voice actually add value for the user? And then adjust the experience accordingly around the actual end user task. So you're not just using voice to do it just because it's emerging tech, but you're actually keeping the end user's intents and tasks in mind and thinking about how voice can actually add value. And I think the second benefit to this is it actually leads to truly multimodal experiences. I like to think about it because at the end of the day, a multimodal experience, in my opinion, is one where it can easily hand off between these different modalities that we're familiar with. And I think that when you approach voice more from the perspective of a conversational experience, it can almost put into a box what a multimodal experience can really be. So when you think about a voice interface as a feature in web or mobile, it's really, the potential is endless of what a multimodal experience can become in that sort of context. So those are two of the main benefits that we see when you think about the voice user interface as a feature versus looking at it as a channel.
Fantastic. Over to you, Ian.
When you did the demo at Project Voice 100 in Chattanooga, Tennessee, in April, I remember thinking, wow, this is like as good of a demo as I've seen. It was just really engaging. I thought, wow, I don't think a lot of people know about Speechly or what you're bringing to market. Tomorrow, you have two of your coworkers that are meeting with Brett Kinsella from voicebot.ai to do a webinar. And today you posted a bit about that. And the first couple of sentences you wrote caught my attention. I was wondering if we could talk about it for a moment. You said the web is and not just any web, but the capital W web. The web is the largest digital surface area we have, but it's also the perfect area for voice UIs to thrive. So my question in that context of that statement is, how are voice UIs thriving today in comparison to how you'd like to see them thrive in the near future?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think the way that I look at it is the way that the voice interface is thriving today is it's in getting a task done, right? But I think that we've only really been able to see that value be realized within these first party voice assistant type ecosystems. It's not really possible as a third party to really play in or get the benefit of really those top 5 use cases that we see on the smart speaker, those first party type experiences. So I think of the opportunity or where I see experiences going is being able to realize some of those same benefits of that first party type experience within like the web specifically. I mean, there's different reasons of why the web itself is specifically interesting, even in comparison to mobile. But I think that at the end of the day, the really interesting opportunity today is being able to look at the last 5 years of data around these experiences we have with smart speakers, which at the end of the day is I think the best way of looking at where user behavior is with just voice enabled experiences in general. But being able to take some of the facts from that, people like to get things done. People don't necessarily like conversation. They might like some sort of voice output, but they would rather just get their information and get on with the next thing. So being able to take some of those truths or some of those insights from the voice assistant experiences that we've seen and being able to realize those in your own domains. And I think web specifically, again, there's a few different variables that makes it particularly interesting. But I think it leads to being able to realize some of those same opportunities.
So when you think about large global 2000 companies, large Fortune 500 companies engaging with Speechly to build out proof of concepts, and let's say they engage with you just to do input, like that's what they want to do. They want to do input so that their staff can use their voice to input content into the cloud, as an example. If a large corporation comes to you and says, hey, pick a department to do proof of concept with us, marketing department, sales department, operations department, R&D department, tech department, pick a department. And let's build a POC around one specific department in our large global organization. What department do you think this voice input might make the biggest impact? And what type of proof of concept might you want to go after in that department?
Yeah, maybe a different way of looking at it. I think it's less department driven, and it might be better to look at like different industries and just looking at the ultimate data and information flows that happen within some of these different areas. Because I think today where voice is able to deliver value is in these areas where efficiency is valued. So in some of these B2B type contexts where if somebody's able to do their job quicker or more efficiently, and it also requires, or maybe one of the bottlenecks in doing that job quicker is the fact that they do have to go through a bunch of these mundane, repetitive forms, not necessarily repetitive in the sense where automation is just going to replace it, because why would you want to do something with voice that could ultimately be replaced by automation? So there's some of these different um, I guess scenarios that might come into play when you think of like just repetitive. So like repetitive isn't good enough, but it's these repetitive and maybe a little bit complex where it might not just be easy enough for automation to come in, but having voice to be able to do that more efficiently. It's really these contexts where there's just a lot of information either being inputted or being searched for that I would look for. But I don't necessarily think that there's a specific piece of the organization that might stand out. I think it's more looking at the way that different industries or different businesses even work, and looking for those opportunities where a lot of information is sort of passing from one area to another.
Is there a limitation on scale at this point? Like, would you need to manage expectations on a proof of concept to say, hey, just let's manage expectations, like this is what we can do? Or do you feel like the ability to scale and to do really ambitious things is on the table at this point right now for Speechly?
Yeah, I think it's purely a function of what people can dream of. I think in the days of AWS and things like that, it's purely a function of adding more cloud capacity. Yeah, so functions of scaling are things that we are definitely positioned for. As it relates to a POC and looking at where the opportunities are for voice, I don't necessarily think that maybe to look at some of these projects that we've seen on voice assistants. I've been having a lot of conversations the last few weeks, really digging into some of these past experiences that we had for like some of these like killer use cases. I'm doing air quotes to think of, like form filling or flight booking. It's like, okay, but why haven't these taken off? And a lot of times it's people, maybe not people, or these organizations are trying to do a lot all at once. So I don't necessarily think scale is the goal. It's really thinking again about being surgical of where voice can add value, uh, proving that, and then you can think about, okay, how do we make sure that we can rinse and repeat and bring this across the organization? But I don't necessarily think that focusing on trying to do everything at once with voice today is is necessarily like the best strategy. It's thinking about where can we strategically, surgically add value with voice today, and then grow from there. As the user behavior also uh, gets built around some of those, I like, again with the air quotes, calling them simple type of features, but those simple types of user behavior, um, or those simple types of use cases lays the foundation to get to some of these more sophisticated or conversational type experiences, if you will. I just think we're kind of skipping a gap there, um, without having some of those best practices around the domains where we're already very familiar.
Awesome. We've got a comment here. Just Gabe is here saying Speechly is great. So there you go. Thanks, Gabe, for your comment. Appreciate that one. Collin, I want to, if it's all right, I just want to shift back a little bit to. I'm really excited to have you on the Voice Den next week. Everybody that comes on the Voice Den has a nickname, and we've got yours on the screen there, the Operator. And I'd love for you to share, like, where did that come from? Why the Operator?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day that I like to just do different things, and for better or worse, I learn by doing. So even when I get into these moments, I think where maybe I'm overthinking things, sometimes maybe even putting the operator on there as a reminder to myself, like, hey, the best way to learn is just getting out there and doing it.
So true.
And so yeah, that's where I think the idea of the operator comes from. And I absolutely love what I do. So I think that I also like to dedicate a lot of time to this stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I think that kind of plays into this overall idea of the operator, if you will.
Awesome. Before we just kind of wrap things up, we do have a question here. And Gabe was wondering, how long has Speechly's journey taken to get to where it is now? Great question, Gabe. Thanks for that.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. So Speechly's your sort of classic deep tech startup. So we're sort of coming out of stealth, if you will, after a good 4 or 5 years of building out the technology. So a lot of times when you see some of these different voice technology tools, they're not actually built completely from scratch. So that's one of the unique things about Speechly. Our team is built by a handful of different machine learning PhDs that were very fundamental in building some of these and being a part of some of these teams at Siri and Alexa, and really seeing some of the problems or maybe the opportunities for thinking about the next generation of voice. And so it's from these experiences that ultimately Speechly has been built. But in terms of core deep voice AI technology being built, that's been around a 4 or 5 year journey. In terms of commercialization, that started this last year. So that's kind of the two buckets that you can look at the timeline of Speechly in.
Fantastic. Well, I've got just a last question here, but Ian, just before I do that, I'm wondering if you've got any other questions. I do want to give Collin a chance to talk about their event tomorrow as well. And maybe Ian, well, see what you can do about twisting Collin's arm here. I think there's some kind of announcement or...
There's a special announcement tomorrow. So if everybody on the live stream and everybody that watches the archive in the next 24 hours promises not to tell anybody, you want to share the special announcement now?
I would love to share the announcement right now. However, I would get in trouble if I shared the announcement. You're going to have to go to the webinar registration.
You're going to join us then. 1 p.m. tomorrow, Pacific time.
Awesome. Okay. So that's going to be, Collin, do you just want to tell us a little more about that? So 1 p.m. Pacific, sorry, 1 p.m. Eastern.
No, Eastern. 1 p.m. I said Eastern. It wrong. I messed you up, Teri.
Tomorrow. Just tell us a little more about that webinar, and people can make sure that they join that.
Yeah, so this is the webinar with our CTO, Hannes, and our Chief Product Officer, Antti, who are going to be essentially walking through Speechly from the perspective of how do you actually deploy a Speechly trained model and then integrate it into an experience. So this is actually a follow-up webinar to the first webinar we did with Brett Kinsella. The first one was sort of like a 101, talking about Speechly and our approach and why we believe what we're doing is unique, along with a few demos. This one's a bit more targeted towards the developer community of like, okay, how can we take that and actually start building? So yeah, the focus of tomorrow is to actually learn how to deploy a Speechly voice user interface specifically within the web.
Fantastic. And Collin, we have had one more question come up here live. Are you okay to answer one more question as far as your time goes? Sure. All right. This one's from Nigel. And Nigel says, what would be your best advice to companies currently sleeping on voice tech, but considering jumping in? Oh, I like that question, Nigel.
Yeah. I would say it sounds counterintuitive, but start small. Like voice doesn't have to be this huge thing. And I would say that there's not necessarily, I wouldn't say that you should go and choose Speechly, but I would say that before you decide on what your voice experience is going to be, you should know that voice doesn't just have to mean conversational voice assistant experience within an Alexa or a Google Assistant ecosystem. There's so much more that it can be. It can mean a voice interface in the web or in mobile, like we're talking about it at Speechly. But it also could be, fundamental, productized versions of speech to text that could be relevant for your industry, note taking, something like that. So there's all these different uses of the core voice technology that can enable, again, the voice assistant being able to talk to technology. But there's also so much more to that. So I would say really anybody that's dipping their toe into the water of voice, really just educate yourself on knowing what the vast opportunities are, because there really is so many different things that you can do.
Fantastic. That's awesome. Last question, Collin. For next week's episode of The Voice Den, people get to ask you questions as a Voicefluencer. What are your topics that you're passionate about that you would love to get questions about? In other words, what do you want people to be asking you about to give you a chance to talk about?
That's a good question. Yeah, and really any questions that relate to, I think when I say opportunities for voice outside of voice assistants, again, a lot of us are familiar with voice because of the Alexas and the Googles of the world. But I'd say if you're interested in like those opportunities that exist outside, bring those questions to me. Happy to answer them. And hopefully give a good answer.
Well, if there's anything like the answers today, I'm sure that they will be very, very valuable. So thanks for that. Collin, great to have you here. Where can people go to learn more about what you're doing, how to get in touch with you, the company, etc.? What are some resources you can share?
Yeah, so if you're interested in learning more about Speechly, you should just email me directly at Collin. That's 2 L's, as you can see in the name here. Collin@speechly.com. I would also recommend just checking us out at speechly.com. If you want to see our demos, speechly.com/demos. Also, I'm pretty active on Twitter at Collin Borns. Definitely would like to chat with anybody there. DMs are open. And then you can check Speechly and LinkedIn, Twitter. Just search for Speechly. You'll find us.
Awesome, Collin. Well, thank you very much to you, Collin, and to you, Ian, for co-hosting as always. We are so fortunate to have Collin, the operator, Borns, join us on the Voicefluencer Show next Wednesday, August 25th, 5 p.m. Pacific. It's entirely free thanks to the sponsorship of Amazon Alexa and Google Assistant. You can save your free seat at thevoiceden.com, and we'll see you there. You'll get a chance to chat with Collin. Till next time, thanks, Collin. Thanks, Ian. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and to everybody else out there, take care.